Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the conversation with me, Talha Ahmed. Today we will be talking about the future of mayoral system in London Borough of Tower Hamlets. We'll also be discussing about concerns of Islamophobia within the Labour Party. But in the first segment, we will be mainly talking about the future of the mayoral system in London Borough of Tower Hamlets. Many of you will be aware that recently the London Borough of Tower Hamlets has decided to ask its residents for their view as to whether to continue with the mayoral system that's been in place for 10 years. This comes as a welcome move for some, while others are furious that this should happen. And so to discuss this matter, we have Councillor Andrew Wood, who is an independent member of the Conservative group, and also the former councillor and statutory deputy mayor, Ohid Ahmed. Welcome you both to our show.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us.
Andrew, can I begin with you? Am I right in thinking that you welcome this opportunity to potentially get rid of the mayoral system?
So I welcome the opportunity to have this debate, but I think the way we're doing this is completely wrong. And if I can correct you, you said earlier the Tower Hamlets Council has decided. Actually, we haven't decided yet. That decision may happen tomorrow night. What has happened is the Labour group in a secret meeting last week decided to have a referendum between only two choices, leader and cabinet and the mayoral system. And we think the way they reached that decision is just completely flawed, because actually there are 6 different options that we could be looking at.
Thank you. I should clarify. I take your point that the council as a whole hasn't decided, but given the dynamics when the Labour group make that decision, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion. But of course, I stand to be corrected. So your concern is, number one, the process in which this decision is being taken, and number 2, the options that would be on the table. Did I understand that correctly?
Correct. So this has all been done in secret. It actually reminds me a little bit of the Brexit referendum. You know, it's been done quickly. It's been done for political reasons. It hasn't been done in public. There hasn't been a public debate. And when you look at other councils across the country, whether it's Sheffield or Newham, who are also both going to have a referendum next May, is they've gone through very different processes. They've gone through public processes. They've had independent experts help them. And at the end of that process, they have decided different options from us. And we've decided to basically rerun the same referendum as 10 years ago between exactly the same 2 choices. And it's more complicated than that, because, for example, a Labour councillor said that they had picked to have a referendum choice, including the mayor and the leader and cabinet model. Well, actually, there are different versions of that. You know, do you elect the leader every year, as we used to do, or do you elect them every 4 years, as is common elsewhere?
Yeah.
Do cabinet members have decision-making responsibility in their own, or is it collective, or does the leader have all of the power? So even when they say it's a leader and cabinet model that we're voting on, actually, there's still lots of questions unanswered about actually how that model would work in practice.
Thank you. Ohid Ahmed, you were the first statutory deputy mayor when the mayoral system was brought in. What is your reaction?
Thank you. Just let me thank you, Talha, for inviting me. Let me go straight forward about the 2 options we have available. You are absolutely right that Labour group has already decided. And when Labour group, the majority group, make a decision, it is very difficult that full council will reject it. Just so you are right of thinking that they are going to make a decision. This is like a rubber stamp. They are going to have a full council meeting, but I very much doubt there will be any changes. So we have 2 options. Rather than talking about 6, 7 options, we have 2 options available now for homeless people, as far as I can understand. One is about mayoral system, and other one is about leadership system, leadership with the cabinet.
So effectively, people would be asked to whether they want to continue with the status quo, or they want to switch to a leader-led model.
Cabinet, yeah.
Right. And what's wrong with that? I mean, ultimately, it's the people of Tower Hamlets who decides. If they don't like the current system, they can go to the other. If they don't like the other, they could stick to the current system. So what's wrong with that?
Exactly. So I fully understand what you were saying. People, at the end of the day, this is how democracy works. If the majority of the townless people decide they want to change the system, they want to go for leadership system, that's fine, absolutely fine. But if the majority people just wanted to go ahead with the current system, if they feel comfortable, I think this is what also we should respect. My personal view, because somebody who was councillor for 4 terms, who served under various leaders and served various cabinet positions, including finance, regeneration, development, and adult health, education. Most of the cabinet position I have done under various leaders. So I can tell you categorically that in Tower Hamlets, leadership system doesn't work.
Okay, we'll come to whether leader system works in a minute. Let me just go back to
Okay.
Andrew. Andrew, you mentioned that there could have been different ways of doing. You mentioned, for example, Niham, which had a democracy commission, or whatever the title exactly was, the name escapes, but they had a group of people who investigated this and came up with some recommendation. And also, I think it was a manifesto pledge of the current mayor Niham. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there was a similar pledge by the mayor in Tower Hamlets. So why do you think that almost at the 11th hour, I mean, we're going to the poll in May next year to re-elect the mayor. So why at the 11th hour they came up with this provision or this decision?
So I think it's so that John Biggs and the Labour group stay in charge of the process of what happens. Because actually both choices next May, if we do stick with what the Labour group have chosen for us, are both what are called strong leader models, which basically means you have one man or woman who's pretty much completely in charge of kind of what happens. And I talked earlier about the 6 options, and those other 4 options basically is where you spread power and responsibility more widely among the group of councillors.
So
and
a proper cabinet model, as opposed to
correct. Yeah. So basically, I mean, there are different ways. I mean, this is the thing. There are lots of different ways of doing this, and different councillors have picked different decisions. What's really interesting is actually in Tower Hamlets we have the national experts on this. There is a group of people called the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny, based in Mansell Street, E1, and whose job it is to basically advise and help councils make these decisions. The Labour group decided not to talk to them, or it would appear not to consult them, have just kind of picked these 2 options. But they're the same options we tried before. So for the last 10 years, we had the mayoral system. And before that, we had the leader in cabinet system. So we haven't really tried anything new. We're just kind of going through the motions. And I think this was done because I think the Labour group and John Biggs knew that given more time, and once COVID was out of the way, that people within the community would start to ask questions and maybe launch petitions looking at different models. That's what happened in Sheffield, for example. And they decided that they would stay in control, because the important point is, once you have a referendum, let's say next May, you can't change your choice for another 10 years. You are then stuck with that model for another 10 years. So I think they decided to go with these 2 options because it keeps a single person in charge. And what we don't know yet is actually which way the Labour group and Mayor John Biggs are going to campaign in this referendum. Will they campaign with Owen in favour of a mayoral system, or will they campaign for a leader in cabinet? And we don't know that yet.
You mentioned that one of the reasons maybe is because they want to have more control in one person. But surely, if you want one person to have more power, mayoral system offers a much better option than cabinet leader-led cabinet, doesn't it?
So yes, in theory, but then the question is who picks that leader. So the thing in the mayoral system, and its advantage, and I don't deny that, is the people pick the leader. The advantage for the Labour group and the leader in cabinet system is that the largest group of councillors, which currently is the Labour group, would pick the leader. So they will probably take the view that in the leader in cabinet model is that they will be in charge. And there is a risk, if they go for the mayoral system, that perhaps somebody else could win.
So potentially what you're saying is that, I mean, potentially 25 Labour councillor, or just more than 25 Labour councillor could potentially end up picking the person who governed the borough, as opposed to now citizens electing it.
Correct. Yes. So that kind of gives them the power. And just one other very interesting thing to mention is the timing of this referendum is 1 year, assuming it happens next May, is 1 year before the local elections in May 2022. So if we do pick the leader in cabinet system, what happens to John Biggs? He's not a councillor. And the papers for the council meeting tomorrow night are not very clear on this. One of the things that we've done in the motion that we're going to be raising is kind of saying it's not sustainable to keep a mayor for a year in a transitional model if actually people have voted for a leader in cabinet model. So potentially, if you, the residents, decide to have a leader in cabinet model and that's what you vote for next May, then that means John Biggs is out of a job in June of next year.
And Ayyar Ali. Wahid Ahmed, I mean, 10 years ago, there were much excitement, allegations of all sorts about this system. But has there been much discussion or appetite for a change?
Well, the appetite is there for the Labour group, I can see that. But obviously, I don't see that much appetite within the community or within the people. I think personally, I agree with Andrew on this point that the leader and mayor, leader with the cabinet system and the mayor, literally they both are going to do the same thing. I don't see much difference between leader and a mayor, elected mayor. People are talking about dictatorship. If somebody become a leader with 15, 16 councillor votes, he become even worse dictator than the mayor. If you have a good mayor, at least he has a fear that he will have to come to people in 4 years' time. And this is why the most of the time, forget about John Biggs, obviously, that one thing I don't want to talk about his failure. It's a long list. But when you look at the previous mayor, you can see the Luthruman, he was a mayor. He has done a lot of things. When he was a Labour leader, he couldn't do those things because somebody was pulling him behind from behind. He had Labour group when he wanted to introduce something new, he couldn't do it. When he wanted to introduce something like he had a long struggle when we went for London Living Wage.
Right. I mean, I'm mindful of the time, so I want to ask you.
Yeah.
It's very likely that we're going to have, whether we like it or not, Taha Hamdans probably is going to have this vote on this system, on a binary choice of current system or an alternative leader-led cabinet, details of which or various iteration of it is not clear yet. Which way are you going to campaign, Wahid Ahmed?
I already started my campaign to keep the system as it is. As Andrew said, that if you have two choices between a leader and the cabinet and the elected mayor, I want the democracy to come to the local people. Local people should choose who is going to lead them rather than hands full of councillors. So I will be strongly campaigning in favor of yes for mayor. We want to continue this system at least for another 1 or 2 terms, because there is a fear. If I can say one more thing, Talha Bhai, sorry, that there is a fear that obviously why they're suddenly trying to change the system, the Labour group. There is a fear that another person, probably we are going to have another mayor from the community soon, and he is going to work for the community. They want to stop that, and they want to have a leader who they can influence, and they can just do their business behind the closed door. And this is why I always, my whole life, I'm a Democrat. Whole life I campaign for the democracy. I want people to choose their leader, and I'm going to campaign for yes for mayor.
Thank you. Andrew, do you share Wahid's concerns?
I think in part because this has been done for political reasons. It's not been done for the community benefit, because if they had believed in that, they would have had a proper debate about all of the different options. So I think, and I wasn't in that secret Labour group meeting. I don't know what happened, and that's the point. Nobody knows what happened in that meeting and what did they debate and why did they vote the way they did in the end. And it's been a little bit like the Brexit referendum, as I said earlier. when you're making long-term political decisions for short-term political interests, that normally causes problems. And I'm worrying again that we're going to have problems because of the lack of clarity over these options. So part of my role will be to make sure is that by the time of the referendum, it's really clear what happens, whichever way you vote. We vote for the leader and cabinet, we know exactly what kind of model and how that works. If you vote for the mayor, we probably just keep the system as it is today. And I see my role kind of making that clear, and also making sure that people have an informed choice. Because I remember 10 years ago, I wasn't entirely sure, what was the right option. And I can't even remember which way I voted, to be honest, because we were busy with local and national elections. And that would be the other part of the problem. We've also got London elections coming on the same day as well.
And Andrew, very quickly, I appreciate that your concern about clarity or lack of it as it stands. Which way are we going to campaign based on what we know so far?
So I'm still thinking it through, because I still don't think I've got enough information, but I'm leaning slightly towards the leader and cabinet system, because I think it can spread power and responsibility a little bit more widely within the cabinet team if you have the right option. So I'm probably leaning in that direction, but as I said, there's just not enough information yet to be 100% sure.
Thank you, gentlemen. We did invite John Biggs to appear himself or send somebody to speak for the Labour group, but we have not had anyone sent to us. But Mayor Biggs has sent us a statement, and you will be able to see the statement in a moment. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the conversation with me, Talha Ahmed. Today we discussed, and before the break, we discussed the future of mayoral system in Tower Hamlets. We had two guests who were reacting to the news that Tower Hamlets Labour Group has decided to opt for a referendum on the future of the mayoral system, which is likely to become a decision of the council at a meeting tomorrow. We did invite the mayor of Tower Hamlets, but he was not available to join us, but he did send us a statement, and for fairness, we'd like you to have a look at the statement. Essentially, the mayor has suggested that he has spent much of his time undoing some of the issues that his predecessor has caused, and that this is now an opportune moment to have a say for the residents to decide whether they want to continue with the status quo as it is, or they want to revert back to the leader-led cabinet model. I'm sure we will talk about this much more in the near future. But now we will be discussing the issue of Islamophobia within the Labour Party. Many of you would be aware that an affiliate of Labour Party, Labour Muslim Network, has published a report in which it makes some very disturbing findings as to the prevalence of Islamophobia within the Labour Party, experience of Muslim members of the Labour Party, and how they perceive the party deals with those issues. And so to discuss those issues, we are joined by Mish Rahman, newly elected member of the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party. In fact, I think the first Bengali ever to be elected to the National Executive of the Labour Party. We're also joined by Councillor Jamaluddin, a councillor in the London Labour Councillor in the London Borough of Redbridge. We are joined by former mayor and councillor of Islington Council, and a former Labour councillor, Rakia Ismail. And I believe we are also joined by Councillor Purumia, a councillor from London Borough of Tower Hamlets. All of you, assalamu alaikum and welcome to our show.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And I could correct you now, I am a conservative councillor in Islington.
Right, okay. Rakia, can I start with you? You were mayor of Islington until very recently. And as your term ended, you also stood down from Labour Party, citing your experience at the hand of some of the colleagues in the party. What do you make of this report from Labour Muslim Network?
First, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much for inviting me to this important discussion on Islamophobia and about the Labour Party. What I can really refer back to first, my experience, what happened to me in Islington Labour. I have experienced Islamophobia, and this is what this actually report supports. I have spoke about it publicly in 2019, and nobody took it seriously, nobody took an action. And to actually see this report, for me, it's something very, very important, very dear to me, and very dear to across the board of Muslim community. I mean, nearly 30%, 30% of the Muslim members and Muslim supporters have experienced Islamophobia. On a national party, a party that braves that they are for equality, justice, and really this report is important. And I would like to hugely say thousands and thousands of thank you to Labour Muslim Network. They have really finally, we have an affiliate of a Labour Party that can really speak up about issues that really matters to people like me, Muslim women like me who are visible.
Sorry, can I just ask you, I mean, look, I'm sure many people had sympathy with you when you expressed those concerns, and this report in many ways confirms, perhaps lends support to your allegations. But how does joining Conservative Party, often been in the news for serious and systematic issues of Islamophobia, how does joining them, would solve your problem?
What does that say about the Labour Party? A Labour councillor actually joining the Conservative, that says so much about the Labour Party. And to be honest and to be fair, if this report is amazing and it's excellent, but what I can say is that the ER Commission report, the Human Rights Commission report, which highlights about anti-Semitics about the Labour Party, is also, if we have had the same kind, it would probably be 60 to 70% people face Islamophobia, because this is an affiliate part.
So you don't think this report fully captures the extent of the problem?
I don't think so. It's an excellent report. It's a beginning. It's a starting point. But I don't think it has actually captured the deep rooted of Islamophobia and discrimination in the Labour Party.
Thank you. Purumia, what I would want to ask you is this. I'd hear your comment on the report, but allegations of Islamophobia in Labour Party is not new, and many has alleged that at different times the Tahir Hamdans Labour Party had probably got its acts wrong in this regard. What do you make of the findings, and do you recognize some of the findings that they make?
Yeah, I'm not surprised by the findings. It's kind of a common experience amongst Muslim members in the Labour Party, where you're accused of dual loyalty, and you're constantly having to reaffirm your commitment to the party. And Tahir Hamdans isn't a stranger to this. Historically, Tahir Hamdans Labour Party has had an issue with the Muslim community, and before that, it had an issue with the Jewish community as well. So in the 70s and 80s, they wouldn't let Bangladeshi Muslims join the Labour Party. They used to say it was full. And only when they put up an independent candidate in Brick Lane and beat the Labour candidate, that's all of a sudden the Labour Party all of a sudden isn't full and started taking applications from Bangladeshi. So it's always been a constant struggle. And I'm not surprised. I think the Labour Party, like all other public institutions, is a reflection of society and reflects the ills out there in society. And the Labour Party isn't immune from that. And we need to work hard. So locally in Tahir Hamdans, in Poplar and Limehouse, for example, we ran workshops with Hope Not Hate, where we ran different workshops. One of them was on Islamophobia, where I participated, and a lot of Muslim members came and expressed their views about how they're being treated by the party. Hope Not Hate have taken that on board, and have gave an oral report to the party leadership. They're running a subconscious bias training for the councillors, and I believe a lot of the white non-Muslim councillors are attending that training to understand the subconscious bias
But
that
I
we
mean,
have.
you say, I mean,
Things are, issues are there, but also I just want to express the positive things that are happening locally as well to address it. It's a work in progress, but it is unacceptable, just like all other forms of racism, and there shouldn't be any differences in terms of racism discrimination. So just like there's zero tolerance on anti-Semitism, as a Muslim, I would expect there should be zero tolerance in Islamophobia. And I look forward to the day when that happens, expressed by the party leadership in all levels.
Thank you. Mr. Rahman, just elected to be in the National Executive Committee. I'm sure you're excited. I'm sure you're looking forward to that role as Muslim, as Bangladeshi, coming from an ethnic community background. What are your thoughts as you read this report?
Thank you for inviting me and thank you for the congratulations. I think it's not just an achievement for myself, it's an achievement for our community that we have Bangladeshi representation at the highest governing body of the Labour Party. So I think the whole community deserves congratulations. It's taken us a few generations to represent the party at different levels, and it's very welcome. Obviously, this report's just shown a powerful light on Islamophobia, which has been faced by Muslims in the Labour Party for many years. I mean, going back to the Blair years, the Labour Party was probably one of the architects of the hostile environment and Islamophobia towards migrants who complained regularly. We've seen these issues. And for too long, there's been an unacceptable silence on this issue. So the Labour Party has to treat this report with the seriousness, which I'm sure it will, and it deserves to, for Muslim members and supporters, deserve a response in the most effective way that we tackle Islamophobia, not just in the party, but nationally as well. Because as you both have said before, Muslims across the country have for decades been a key pillar of Labour's support, and the report also touches on this, and the party has to stand by their Muslim supporters and voters and members of the public as they have stood by Labour. And I just echo what Puru has just said, that there should be a zero tolerance approach to all forms of racism and all forms of bigotry.
Can I just ask you?
None more serious than the other. Yeah.
Can I just ask you? I appreciate that you are, very newly elected member of the NEC, but there aren't that many Muslims in the National Executive Committee. Have the party mechanism been in touch, formally or informally, with you, following this report to see, to get your thoughts on perhaps what could happen?
I've only been elected recently. We've got NEC meeting coming up soon. Obviously, I haven't been in contact regarding this issue in itself. I have spoken to the leader of our party, and this is something that he has said that he will take seriously, as has the deputy leader also been publicly said that they will be taking this report seriously, and we hope they do. I just want to say to the sister who spoke earlier, any victim of any racism in any, whether it's in the Labour Party or outside, deserves sympathy, and we, the Labour Party, I'm sure will according to reports, when we implement the results of it, recognise that there must be victims of racism and victims of Islamophobia, and there is sympathy. I would have urged the sister to stay in the party, to fight for justice, to stay for justice, and unfortunately, the Conservative Party and the values in the Conservative Party cannot dictate to the Labour Party how to treat racism, because, as the sisters just said, there's a report by Hope Not Hate only in October confirmed that 60% of Conservative members believe poisonous myths about no-go areas in Britain where Sharia law dominates and non-Muslims.
Right. Look, I don't really want to get into the. Sorry, both of you.
I won't be taking any lectures from the Conservative Party.
It's fine. Listen, we are not talking about the Conservative Party. We've spoke about them. Rakia, please. I need to bring Jamal.
I'm not talking about someone else's experience. I'm talking about my purely.
It's fine. Okay, please. I don't want our discussion to be on the Conservative Party, because we've discussed extensively about Islamophobia in the Conservative Party, and also because we don't really have anyone from Conservative in that capacity today. Jamal, you've been listening to them very patiently. Do you share what you've heard so far from your colleagues, former colleague?
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me, first of all, and congratulations to Ms. Bai for your achievement. And I think you're absolutely right. It's all of the communities and BME People's Labour Party's members' achievement. So we appreciate that, and congratulations to you. I think both of the Ms. Bai and then Puru Bai mentioned already. I think it has to be zero tolerance. And the report came in. Labour Muslim Network, which is actually alarming. I'm really concerned about this, and we all should be concerned about this. Though it's only 422 people been interviewed, but one is too many of those they complain. So we have to be we need to take this quite seriously. And I think one of the things that as soon as we have received that about a couple of days ago, very first thing that I did. I have contacted to my local MP, West Eating. And actually, West Eating had immediately communicated with Keir Starmer and Gemma Rayner. And we have talked about the Islamophobia definition that we have developed over the last couple of years. I don't know whether you have heard about the all-party parliamentary group.
Yes, we've discussed this. But
FPPG.
Yeah, but Jamal, let me just stop you for a moment. One of the things that concerns me is that, Puru spoke about, it's been work in progress. But one of the things that concerns me is that it's not the first time a report identifies challenges of Islamophobia. We knew from multitude of reports that Islamophobia was on the rise across the country. We knew that almost half of the hate crimes, religious hate crimes, are attributed to hate crimes towards Muslims. Labour Party is part of this wider society. It would not have been immune. And in 2015, when giving decisions in the Lutfur Rahman judgment, this is what His Honour Judge Richard Morey had to say about Labour Party's treatment of Lutfur Rahman. Although this judgment will have to be critical of Mr. Rahman in many respects, in the matter of his deselection, the court cannot but sympathize with him. His treatment by the NEC was, by any standards,
let me come back to this
utterly, let me finish, utterly shameful and wholly unworthy of the party which rightly prides itself on having passed the Human Rights Act. Many will say that the treatment, the manner in which Lutfur at the time was, deselected or suspended, potentially amount, especially if you go by the APPG definition, amount to Islamophobia, and entrism was very much an allegation against him. So why is the party still needing an LMN or somebody like them to come up with a report to take drastic action?
Well, let me come back to this. Yeah, I think what they mentioned, you were mentioning about the ex-mayor of Tower Hamlets, Lutfur Rahman's, his kind of case. I think it's probably, we cannot make any comment on that. It's long time ago. It's had happened. Obviously.
I'm sorry, you misunderstand me.
No. Hold on. It's not about. It's debate about the recent report about the.
Mr. Jamal,
now let's talk about this rather than an individual, because we cannot make a judgment about what happens, because
the judge is saying. I'm not making a judgment. Judge is saying. I'm quoting a.
Sorry, Jamal, I totally disagree with you. We need to pull out.
I think what you have to look at. We have to look at the report and the recommendation.
And
there are seven. Hold on a minute.
Okay, Puru, just hold on a moment. Jamal, yes, please speak.
Yeah, there are 7 recommendations in this report came out a couple of days ago. What we have to look at how we can implement those recommendations, and those recommendations are the bread and butter. We have the Islamophobia, not only Labour Party. Islamophobia has been happening across everywhere. We can see that day in, day out. Labour Party is a big party, like 600,000 members it has. And I'm not surprised as a lot of other people say in here, that it's happening. It's happening. But this is, let's be honest about this. This is the first report came out addressing this issue and how we can work together, all of us, in order to implement those recommendations. From the left, from the right, from the center, we all need to work together. And I think the most important thing is that we need to bring the leader and deputy leader of the Labour Party and the rest of the party accountable to implement those recommendations.
Thank you. I think
just
your point is very
there.
clear. Puro, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I think those issues have been around for decades in the Labour Party, not just Islamophobia, but other forms of prejudices as well. And that's why we as minority groups and groups that are oppressed need to come together and demand that the Labour Party changes. And it has changed, but there's a lot of things that need to be changed. And we shouldn't just rely on a top-down approach. We need to, as Labour Party members, we need to demand change from our local parties. We need to demand change from our local authorities as well. And Islamophobia kills. You know, look at the high COVID death rates. It's no coincidence that Muslim communities disproportionately have higher COVID death rates than our other communities, and that's to do with structural discrimination. And we need to basically demand from Labour local authorities a different approach. For example, in Oldham, where you have a Muslim leadership and a deputy Muslim leader, they took a much more proactive approach in terms of COVID test and trace, and they have very low infection rates. But you look at local Labour local authorities, large Muslim communities with non-Muslim leadership, that approach doesn't seem to have taken place. So we need to demand from Labour local authorities, demand from local Labour parties that they need to change, and they need to take account of the structural discrimination that Muslims face, and they need to come up with some structural solutions, not just kind words and not just a long report, but action. And that's what we need to demand as a Muslim members in the Labour Party, but also members of the Muslim community should demand from the Muslim representatives in the Labour Party as well.
Thank you. Ms. Rahman, we've seen much discussion about anti-Semitism culminating in the report of the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, and Labour Party has adopted all the recommendation. Do you think that there is a case, certainly, that it shouldn't be just about anti-Semitism? All forms of racism should be dealt with the same level of seriousness and enable an independent body to deal with certainly the most serious of those offences.
Yeah. I mean, we've already stated that myself and Purumi have both said this. All racism is poison. We cannot tolerate any form of racism, and none of the racism, no different forms of racism should be conflated with each other as well. They're all a poison, and we should rid of them of all society. But I mean, I've just heard the discussion between my two colleagues there. The problem with the Muslim community faces that they feel that the Labour Party taken for granted, that the Muslim people have nowhere else to cast their vote. And that is a concern for me as a National Executive Committee member. And I will be relaying these fears to the committee, that the Muslim community does not have another political home. And we must, as a political party, must make sure that we give back to the Muslim community assurances that we are not going to be tolerating any kind of discrimination either within the party or in wider society, because Labour Party is traditionally the home of Muslim working class communities, and we must make sure that Muslim communities feel safe in their communities and in the party as well.
Thank you. Rakia, you've seen, I mean, this report comes after you resigned from the party, citing very similar allegations. But looking at the reaction that there has been, including media coverage and Labour Party's response, are you assured that the party is moving in the right direction, and that had you not left, you could have lived with the arrangement that are being spoken of?
Well, to be honest, I'll just go back to the point of the leadership. In terms of, and also in terms of the Muslim elect members, it's a question of accountability. And it's not just a question of accountability for the leadership, it's a question of accountability for every Muslim elect member in the party to take this. The leadership already is having, for God knows long, ideological crisis or some sort of crisis that they are having in fight. And these crises are going to be, they are overlooked for Islamophobia and all sorts of discrimination. That is not right. This discrimination in terms of whether it's anti-Semitic, Islamophobia, all forms, is a human violation. It's a very basic human violation. And that's what the Labour Party has done. And it's just so great that the Labour Muslim Network has unleashed this, we have all known, God knows long.
Thank you.
However,
Yeah,
it is important what is happening and what they are doing. But I would personally, for myself, I would like to see the actions that is being taken. And of course, to the brother, I would like to say, I mean, of course, we all say the Labour Party is the home for the Muslim community. I think that is really disrespecting the individuality of the Muslim community. It's impossible to say that the whole Muslim community.
Well, I don't think anybody's saying whole Muslim. Rakia, thank you. Let me just bring Jamal again. I mean, we heard from Puru about initiatives taken locally in Tar Hamlets to raise awareness of and provide training to develop understanding of Islamophobia and stand guard against it. Do you have similar initiatives? I mean, let me just ask slightly differently. Do you think that these challenge exist in Redbridge, for example? And what are you guys doing in Redbridge to ensure that the Labour Party there is inclusive and does not discriminate Muslims and indeed others based on their religious or racial views, racial identities?
Let me answer this question. I think this is a very good question. I think so. In Redbridge Council, the very first council that we have, we are the very first council that will introduce the APPG, all-party parliamentary group Islamophobia definition. What it means is that we are the first local authority who have addressed this this document, and we have approved in the council meeting and introduced that document through the policy as a policy in the Redbridge Council. So what it means is that we cannot tolerate anybody speaking against or anybody kind of making bigotry comments about the Muslims. So any form of Islamophobic or comments cannot be tolerated within that definition. Now, the second thing is the question you asked me, the Ilford North, where I am a councillor in there, and my constituency, we haven't received any. According to my knowledge, I have never received. We have never received any Islamophobia complaint. There maybe there are one or two complaints in the south which is being dealt with at the moment, but I cannot obviously for legal reason I cannot just anything say more than that. But there are probably in the south of the
one part of my question was: are there programs run by either your local authority or the party?
Okay, so that's yeah. So the program that we have been running through the council to the SMT member of staff is this: the unconscious biasness, for example, conscious biasness, for example, Puru by mentioned earlier. This has been running for quite some time. Also, in terms of the equality. The social justice, for example, those programs are ongoing. Members program, the officers program at the grassroots level, even within the Labour Party member, we have those programs are running as well. So yes, up and running those programs. Obviously, it's hard to pinpoint exactly where and what this program and when this program were run, but from the strategic point of view. In the like Tar Hamlets in Redbridge, we have this program, the not just only Islamophobia, I mean all sorts of discrimination that inequality.
Right. Okay. I mean,
has been
we don't have the time, but there's a whole body of argument that when you lump all the form of prejudice together, often some gets overlooked, and Islamophobia often happen to be one of those that gets overlooked. But
Can I come in? Can I come in on
Yeah,
that?
sure, sure. But very briefly, please. Yes.
We need to go beyond motions and look at outcomes. Like, for example, in Tower Hamlets, we passed the Islamophobia definition. Yet within a few months of passing that motion, the council banned the Big Right for Palestine, where the actual Islamophobia definition protects free speech on places like Palestine and Kashmir. It actually mentions Palestine and Kashmir. So we need to look at outcomes, and we need to move away from recommendations and writing letters, but look at outcomes and look at outcomes.
Thank you.
And that's the same with the Prevent program as well.
Thank you.
very much.
Time is.
Actions speak louder than words. And that's what the
Sorry,
movement
I want to bring Mish. Before we leave, I want to bring Mish Rahman again. Look, you are probably in the best placed in terms of Labour Party policy to bring a voice and perhaps effect some change. What would you aim to achieve while you are a member of NEC, given what we know from this report?
Well, we would, the party will hopefully implement everything that is in the report. We'll also would urge, like I said before, to make the Labour Party a safe place for all Muslims to feel welcome in the party, and not just Muslims, people of all colour and all gender. The party should be a safe place, because the Labour Party is an anti-racist party, and that is what we'll be aiming to do. And again, I urge to my sister that if she stayed in the party, we would have made sure that she gets justice by leaving the party and joining the Conservatives. Yet she hasn't done any. I mean, it doesn't look good for Muslims either, because you've gone out of the frying pan and into the fire, where you've got a racist leader who openly says that Muslim sisters look like letterboxes. So
Right,
I mean,
okay.
it doesn't.
Mish, I'm
look
sorry,
good for
I have
us
to
as
stop you.
well.
My time is up.
Can I quickly respond?
20
that?
seconds.
Yeah, okay, brother. I can say that in terms of me joining the party, the only reason this report came out is because of me. And if I did not leave the party, it would have gone under the carpet. So, brother,
You could have left the party. You could have left the party, but not joined the most racist, the more racist party.
It's not the most racist. The most racist I have faced, and that it went under the carpet, is the Labour Party. And let's face it, it's black and white.
Well,
Okay, can I ask a question to sister? Can I ask a question to sister? Sister,
Yes.
the APPG report definition wanted to be implemented. Boris Johnson, your party is opposing to implement that. Why is that? What are you going to do about this?
Take time.
The all-party parliamentary group has approved this report, and then your party is blocking that. Why is that?
I'm not a spokeswoman for the Conservative Party. I'm barely there 2 months, but I'm telling you my shared experience, my life experience. In 6 years, I've been complaining. No, brother. You can't say that.
Thank you. I'm afraid that's all we have time for. You are watching the conversation. It's a serious issue, a lot of emotions involved, and there are historic experience, lived experience of individuals, collective experience of communities. And indeed, these issues will be around and has been around, and we will look for opportunities to discuss on more occasions in the future. But for today, I think what we can agree on is that in the 21st century Britain, neither a state institution nor a political party nor any other institution should treat anyone differently or negatively or with prejudice because of their race or religion. We would hope that Labour Party, with a great history of acting as a voice for many minority, for many people in marginal communities, will rise to this challenge and address it head on and adopt the recommendations. But that's all the time for us. I would like to thank all our panel who joined us today and gave up their valuable time. I'd like to thank you at home and wherever you are for watching this program. Until next week, that's all from us. But you can watch this program on our Facebook page, TV1 UK, after this program at your convenience. Do join us next week again, same time. But until then, Allah Hafiz.